If I present two pieces of art to you, we can objectively determine which of the two is more aesthetically pleasing. Through analysis, we can swiftly establish a connection with the artist. Previously, we've delved into various aspects such as how to scrutinize artwork, interpret symbols, and explore color theory. While we've endeavored to delve into the artist's psyche, there's a crucial component missing to fully immerse ourselves in their work. This missing element is also pivotal for a comprehensive understanding of contemporary art, which may not always yield to traditional analysis. This crucial element is what we refer to as context. The context surrounding a piece of art encompasses its artistic era at a broad level, delving further into specifics like the influences an artist draws from, and ultimately, the intricate details of an artist's life. Art movements are a way of categorizing and understanding the different styles and techniques used by artists throughout history. They frequently emerge in response to social, political, or technical advances, and they may have a substantial influence on both the art world and wider society. These movements provide a framework for analyzing and appreciating art, as well as a way of tracing the evolution of artistic expression over time. Art movements are frequently attributed to a group of artists, rather than to the art of a single artist working alone. Artists with the same style will share a common belief about art, its direction, and style. For example, medieval art has the Catholic religion as a common theme. The common style is flat, without tangible emotions, often decorated with gold and Christian symbols that refer to events that occurred in the time of Christ. The evolution of this movement was the Renaissance, where the themes are similar, but we have a different context. If before God was the predominant figure of social thought, in the Renaissance was the man who was placed at the center, his abilities and his emotions. Artists looked at the world more realistically. The use of perspective is introduced, and nature is represented more faithfully. We also go further with the themes. They are not only religious, but we also see pagan art and portraits. The art movement represents a shift in the art world's artistic orientation. These artists are actively creating something new and fresh for their era, rather than simply recreating past art. Many new art trends did not initially garner favorable evaluations from the public. This was the case of Impressionism, which deviated from the style in vogue at the time, realism. While realism represented reality accurately and realistically, without taking into consideration the individual, but his social condition of life, Impressionism focused on ordinary feelings or experiences captured in a precise moment. This idea also influenced the pictorial style of Impressionism, which is characterized by fast brushstrokes with a very light and harmonious color. External forces, like politics, also assist in shaping artistic movements. This is the case with Dadaism. After World War I, a group of artists were shocked by the senselessness of war, so they came together to create works of art without any logical sense. Understanding artistic movements and why they were formed helps us to understand the art of individual periods much better. At first glance, the work The Fountain simply seems like a urinal, but understanding what the artist intended to communicate gives us a series of new information that helps us understand better. I made a video in which I explain the most important artistic movements in the history of art. It is an excellent starting point for understanding style and thought in the various centuries of history. After understanding artistic movements, the second step is to see the influences that some have drawn from previous artists. This defines a link between one movement and another. The change in artistic style and its evolution are highlighted. Very often, the artist who takes inspiration creates a new, unique style. For years, it was believed that the Russian-born artist Wassily Kandinsky was the first Western artist to devote himself to abstract art. Studying in depth, he learned about another artist, Hilma Klint, who a few years earlier had created a new way of making art. Kandinsky evolved his art by stimulating the human brain simply by looking at his paintings. Without Klint, Kandinsky probably would never have arrived at the concept that made him famous. The last step to understanding a work of art lies in understanding the life of an artist, his experiences, and his psychological condition. We must not forget that artists are not gods, but human beings, and like us, they have had life experiences that have marked their evolution. In the first example, The Sick Child, we observe a sick girl in a bed and a sad woman holding her hand. We can analyze the painting, observe the colors, and the pictorial style, and what we understand is a very sad event, but we cannot understand anything else. If we go deep into the life of Edvard Munch, we see that this painting is a very personal representation of a tragic event in his life. The girl is his sister, who soon died due to tuberculosis. Knowing this detail, we can better understand the psychological state of the artist, the darkness of the work, and his pain. The second example is the famous scream. We can see how this painting is an artistic representation of his anxious condition and how the artist shouts because he needs help. But this is only part of the scenario. At the time, Munch was suffering from financial difficulties, and his art was not having the success he believed he deserved. Let's remember that his sister's tragic event happened before the realization of the scream, and that he moved from Norway to Germany, starting everything from scratch. The tragedies that surround his life, the uncertainty of starting from scratch without knowing if he will be successful as an artist, make us better understand his condition of sadness and anxiety. The scream now has a deeper meaning. We can understand everything better. What if I told you that besides these two paintings, this last one was also done by Munch? It has a completely different impact, right? Well, this makes us understand how paintings are like a visual diary for the artist. They tell us snapshots of life and a glimpse inside their mind. The sun was created when Munch left the sanatorium. His art seemed to have developed. The colors used are bright, and the rays of the sun seem to stretch to each corner of the painting. Now I'll give you an example that we can reflect on to put together everything we talked about today. This is Jackson Pollock's painting. I chose this artist because many people fail to appreciate him. If you don't like it at the moment, watch this part. And if at the end of the video you can appreciate it a little more, write a comment below. Jackson Pollock was an American painter and one of the greatest exponents of abstract expressionism or action painting. First step, we understand the art movement. This was born after the Second World War, when thanks to the American New Deal, European artists such as Duchamp, Mondrian, and others moved to America, bringing with them different pictorial styles that strongly influenced abstract expressionism. The movement demonstrates a certain anarchic rebellion, vitality, and creativity that evolves from European standards of beauty. It represents the purest freedom of thought. This movement has artists who have very different styles from each other. Step 2. Let's now look at the influences that made this movement develop. Cubism, Dadaism, Abstractionism, Bauhaus, Futurism, Surrealism, and artists such as Hans Hofmann and George Grosz. Furthermore, it is important to remember that at that time, new concepts about quantum mechanics and psychoanalysis were beginning to flourish and change Western civilization's entire understanding of the world and self-knowledge. The earlier art of Kandinsky and Mondrian had sought to move away from portraying objects, and instead sought to pinch and tickle the emotions of the viewer. Action art appropriated this attempt and developed it, using Freud's ideas on the subconscious as its main foundation. Action artists' paintings were not intended to portray any object, and were not created to stimulate emotion. Instead, they were created to touch observers deep in their subconscious. The last step is related to better understanding Pollock's life. Jackson was born in 1912 in Cody, Wyoming. Already from the first years of his life, he was full of energy and very exuberant, so much so that he was expelled from school for indiscipline. He had the opportunity to come into contact with Native Americans while accompanying his father on business. This marked him greatly in his art. In fact, Native Americans find inspiration from the spirit world. This art form, practiced by sorcerers in a state of extreme trance, had a great influence on Pollock, who, thanks to it, developed his own famous technique called pouring. In fact, sorcerers used to pour colored sand onto a flat surface. Pollock was also well acquainted with other disciplines such as psychoanalysis. During his time under the care of Joseph Henderson, a Jungian psychoanalyst, he created many psychoanalytic drawings as a therapy for alcoholism. He then used these drawings to discuss his mental state with doctors. All these influences and life experiences lead us to understand Pollock's paintings. At first glance, we see some spilled color, but knowing something more about life, we understand that his process does not show or express an objective or subjective reality, but releases a tension that in large quantities has accumulated in the artist. It is an unconceived and unplanned action in terms of execution and final effects. It expresses the artist's discomfort in a society of well-being where everything is planned. It is a violent reaction of the artist intellectual against the artist technician. What remains on the canvas is not the creative art, but what remains of the struggle and the artistic process.